Damascus. The buses come every night, in the middle of the night, full of Iraqis, sometimes with everything they own. They are fleeing the violence that's become part of daily life in their homeland.
I sold all my belongings and I was defeated, and I ran away, and this is what I could carry with me.
They killed my husband, and I fear for my kids.
They've come seeking safety. By Syrian law, Arabs do not need a visa to enter the country. They are not in camps like so many refugees around the world, but live in instant towns that have sprung up in the past 4 years. Virtually all these apartment buildings in the Jeramana suburb of Damascus were built after the Iraq War started. The streets bear the names of Iraqi towns. This is Fallujah Street. This barbershop, this fruit store, all Iraqi. This kebab shop was a well-known Baghdad fast food joint, now relocated to Damascus. It is here we meet an Iraqi man named Imad and his baby daughter. He took us to his apartment to meet the rest of his family, his wife and young son. They fled Baghdad in August of 2004 after an attempted kidnapping.
My son was standing in front of the door of the house, and I was going outside to get him in. And I looked out and I saw a car stopping, and a young man got out of it. He grabbed my son and put him in the car, and I caught up with them at the last minute, and the guy ran away. So I decided to leave.
Imad was a video cameraman in Baghdad. He says insurgents came after his son because they believed Imad was cooperating with the Americans.
Because I was shooting at a medical conference and Paul Bremer was giving a speech, and he was the head of the coalition. There were other networks who were there also, and the following day that was broadcast and I was seen. I was accused of cooperating with the Americans in video production.
The United Nations estimates that more than 2 million people have fled Iraq because of the violence, with half of them, more than 1 million, coming to neighboring Syria. Most of them take the road to Damascus, the historic, bustling, secular capital of Syria. Imad Mustafa is the Syrian ambassador to the United States.
I think this is a huge burden that almost no country is fully equipped and prepared to handle.
In your country, I hear the refugees referred to sometimes as, quote, visitors.
Yes.
Why is the phrase visitors used?
We dislike the term refugees. Those are our brothers and sisters, and the moment they enter Syria, they are automatically granted almost equal rights to the Syrian citizens. This is why we abstain from using the term refugees. We think it's in a way or another pejorative.
They were welcomed with open arms. They were up to now, and that has to be recognized.
Lawrence Yoles is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR, representative in Syria. He says the Syrians get high marks for allowing all the Iraqi refugees in.
You have possibly 20 to 30,000 Iraqis coming into, sometimes even more, coming into Syria on a monthly basis. And that's a lot.
Refugees started flowing as soon as the U.S. came in. At that time, many were well-off Ba'athists, people with money, says Ibrahim Hamidi, Damascus correspondent for the London-based Al Hayat newspaper.
But now, some of them ran out of money. So they started to sell their properties, their furniture, their clothing, their properties, whatever. Now, what will happen after 1 year, 2 years, when they run out of assets?
And last year, a new type of refugee started pouring into Syria, says Pippa Bradford with the UN's World Food Program. She says the bombing of an important Shiite mosque in Samarra in 2006 unleashed a new cycle of violence that caused Shiites and Sunnis to flee quickly.
People were coming across feeling personally threatened. They didn't want to reveal the fact that they were leaving, so they weren't doing, selling their household goods and so on. And then they would essentially come across with very little in their pocket.
Right now, the World Food Program is feeding 6,000 Iraqis in Syria. That number, says Bradford, will increase to 30,000 by the end of the year. With jobs difficult to come by and rent prices skyrocketing, some refugees in Syria are becoming desperate.
3 kids were kidnapped, and the kidnappers asked for ransoms. This is new. And some thieves killed people for the sake of money. This is new in Syria. Normally, in Syria, the thieves or the criminals go to houses to steal, and they threaten people by killing, but they do not kill them. Now we are witnessing new techniques of criminality, which is new to the Syrian society.
We're talking about prostitution, especially children being the ones most worrying to us, and child labor, and criminality is growing in this country. And this is something that the Syrian government is highly alert to. And this could be the real trigger point if the Syrian government does decide that this is too harmful to their own position. They may just say, we've got to draw the line, and this is something that nobody wants.
We've been told that there are problems of juvenile delinquency, prostitution, child labor, and crime coming in with this refugee tide. How is Syria dealing with that?
Look, let us first admit that these problems exist. Having said this, it does not mean that they are because of the Iraqis themselves. These problems always happen when a country becomes lawless, when the civil society, the social fabric of a country is shattered and disintegrated.
Well, when we talk about the refugee crisis, who's to blame?
We blame the United States first and foremost. The United States is the occupying force in Iraq, and the policies of the occupation in Iraq have caused the collapse of the Iraqi state. Law and order do not exist anymore in Iraq, and you have to remember that these levels of violence are unprecedented in the history of Iraq. 1,400 years of the history of Iraq have never witnessed such a sectarian strife. This is the first civil war in the history of Iraq.
American did what? All this blood in the street of Baghdad?
The Syrian ambassador is not the only one blaming Uncle Sam. This man, who fled with his wife and children and everything they own, is angry with the U.S.
America's responsible, I swear to you on that. We're not just claiming that, we saw it with our own eyes. As long as America is in Iraq, there is no stability.
And at the Iraqi barbershop, barbers were some of the first victims of insurgents because shaving is seen by some fundamentalists as against Islamic law. They also say America is to blame.
It's all because of the occupation. It destroyed the country and ruined it.
The United States government has a different view. I spoke with the Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, Ellen Saubre. Well, when we were in Syria, we talked to a fair number of refugees coming into Syria out of Iraq and for the first time. And it was not unusual when they got off the buses, recognizing that our crews were American crews, to say, you're the problem, you're the reason we're here, you're the reason we're suffering. What would you say to them if they were in this room at the moment?
I would say that anyone that has had to flee from their homes because of turmoil and conflict are going to be, having gone through trauma, are going to be extremely upset. But I think if you look at the overall situation in Iraq, our goal there and our fundamental goal has got to be to create a peaceful, stable Iraq. The sectarian violence that occurred after the bombing of the Samarra Mosque was not caused by the United States, and the reason for much of the outflow has been sectarian violence.
Ambassador Saubre recently went to Syria and met with government officials about the refugee situation. It was the first high-level U.S. contact with the Syrian government in 2 years.
It was a cordial opportunity for us to talk about how the United States can provide assistance. We recognize that when you have these large refugee influxes into a country, that it creates significant problems.
She went there to tell us that the United States is concerned and to urge us to open our borders to allow more and more refugees to come into Syria. It's ironic, but it's also sad.
What aid, what assistance is the United States offering?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
You mean zero?
As far as we know, zero. They almost don't talk to us, so how can you discuss offering aid to us?
The administration of President Bush has a long list of problems with the government of the Syrian leader Bashar Assad. Sponsoring terrorism, allowing insurgents to pass through the country to Iraq, and aiding in the assassination of the late Lebanese prime minister. These are charges the Syrians have denied, and charges that have made relations cool, if not outright cold, with Washington.
We don't directly fund the Syrian government programs. What we do fund are the international organizations, and this is really the standard operating procedure for our refugee program worldwide. We don't give our money directly to a government. We give it to the International Red Cross, to UNICEF, to the World Food Program, and primarily in the refugee context to UNHCR.
The UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Outfit, recently put out an appeal for $60 million for the Iraq refugee situation. The U.S. government pledged $18 million, about 30% of the request. The goal is to register refugees so they may be resettled, possibly to the United States.
People ask, well, what's going to happen to these 2 million refugees? And as you know, we have a robust resettlement program. We resettle more people than all the rest of the world combined in any given year. And we have a very strong commitment to identifying the people who are the most vulnerable.
How many Iraqis have been allowed to resettle here?
It's been a very small number for two reasons. The first reason being that between 2003 and 2006, most of the effort was people going back to Iraq, not looking for resettlement in a third country. The other reason was that after 9/11, very difficult security clearance processes were put into place that had not existed before. The enhanced security process was so tedious and took such a long time that UNHCR stopped referring Iraqi refugees to our program.
The number of Iraqi refugees that have been resettled in the U.S. is less than 500 since the start of the war, 200 of them last year. The U.S. does resettle 70,000 refugees a year worldwide. Washington recently announced a plan to accept 25,000 Iraqi refugees this year. But that number may be unreal. Right now, there is a 9-month wait to even register to come to the U.S., and a Homeland Security check may take months more. And the UN says such resettlement does not provide a real solution anyway.
It's not a response to the much larger problem of the 1 million or more people who are here. It doesn't really support the host country because it takes away a very, very small number compared to the very large number of people who are here.
And the host country, Syria, could face real problems if the numbers of refugees continue to climb. There are increasing signs of frustration.
In the last few weeks, and now the Syrians, people blame the Iraqis for all problems they have. They are behind the increase of properties. They are behind of the increase of real estate. They are behind of we don't have a job. I mean, so they are blaming Iraqis for all problems they have. So this is risky for the stability, for the balance of the Syrian society.
Syrians are concerned about the future of the refugee situation, but they say it's not about politics. It's about helping their fellow Arabs.
Mr. Ambassador, when it comes to Iraq and what's happened there, do you or not subscribe to the idea that we, the United States, broke it, to use Colin Powell's phrase, and therefore it is up to us to fix it?
That would be fair had it not been cynical. We care a lot for our Iraqi brothers and sisters, and we cannot take a position in which we would say, well, the Americans wanted to do this against our advice. We told them, because we were on talking terms prior to the invasion of Iraq, we told the US, don't do this. You will end up solving one problem, which is the problem of Saddam Hussein, but you will create many, many more problems that you almost don't understand their nature. You will be unleashing forces that you really do not understand their true nature. The United States, of course, dismissed all our arguments and it decided to invade and occupy Iraq. It would be very cynical for us to say, well, they created those problems, let them pay the price for those problems and let them suffer. The only thing we want from the United States is to reconsider its policies in Iraq and understand that a political solution is the only possible solution in Iraq. Bringing stability and peace back to Iraq will resolve this issue.
Coming next, The story of one young Iraqi man with a dream.
I ask only for one thing. It's just a dream that I always had in my mind. Just want to go to the United States.
The incredible tale of survival of Joey, who worked for the Americans in Iraq and paid a heavy price for it.